Hi, it's Karen here from the Learning Cauldron. With the Higher German paper coming up on Monday, I know that many students are anxious about the translation section, but there's really no need to be. If you remember the 3 things that I'm going to tell you, you should be able to avoid dropping marks unnecessarily. So, what are those 3 things? Firstly, tenses. Always check that every verb in the source German text is translated into the correct tense in your English version. So, for example, if there's a present tense in the German, generally there would be a present tense in the English. If there's a past tense in the German, generally that would be translated by a past tense in the English. If there's a future or conditional tense in the German, generally that would be translated by the future or conditional in English. However, there are exceptions, and you do need to watch out for these. They're the sort of little surprise that the examiners might pop in just to see if you're paying attention. One of these words to watch out for is seit. S-E-I-T. Often seit would be translated by since in English, but if you see seit followed by a period of time, then beware. If, for example, the German sentence were Ich wohne seit 20 Jahren hier in Kinross, you'll notice that the Germans use a present tense here, ich wohne. However, in English, we would use a different tense, known by the lengthy name of the present perfect continuous. Therefore, we would translate Ich wohne seit 20 Jahren hier in Kinross by I have been living here in Kinross for 20 years. I have been living. So watch out for that word seit. And watch out also for the word for. V-O-R. Followed by a period of time, for example, 7 years. Vor 7 Jahren would translate in English as 7 years ago. So that's my first tip. Watch out for the tenses of the verbs. The second tip is not to leave anything out of your translation. Now, you may think that that's a pretty obvious thing to say, but you would be amazed at how many people, just in the heat of the moment in the exam, drop out a simple word. For example, sehr. Failing to translate a single word like that could cost you a mark, which would be particularly galling if it was a word you almost certainly knew. Always make sure that you translate every unit of meaning, but equally don't necessarily translate the text word for word. You may need to rephrase. For example, if there were a sentence, Klaus hat mit 18 Jahren die Schule verlassen, if you translated mit 18 Jahren literally as with 18 years, it would sound rather clunky in English. So you need to think what we would use naturally in English to convey the same meaning. For example, Klaus left school when he was 18, or Klaus left school at age 18. Of course, if we mustn't leave any meaning out, equally we mustn't add any meaning either. Again, I'm talking about little words like sehr. If they're not there in the German, there's no need to add them in the English. Likewise, if there's a singular noun in the German, then don't change it into a plural form in the English, unless there's a very good reason, such as that we simply would not use a singular in the English in that context. So, unless there's an exceptional reason to do so, don't change a singular noun, for example, Tochter in German, into a plural noun, let's say daughters with an S in English. You're adding an S, which means that you are technically adding something to the meaning. So that's 3 tips, 3 things to remember. Firstly, check all your verbs. Make sure that they are in the correct tense in your English version. Secondly, take care not to remove any meaning. And thirdly, take care not to add any meaning. You can check you've done this correctly by putting your finger on each of the words in the exam paper, one by one, and making sure that something in the English renders that word or phrase. Good luck in the exam, or should I say, viel Glück.